Reclaim is a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter, with your host, Thais Sky. Together, we will explore the questions of what does it look like to reclaim our sovereignty, our worthiness, our voices as women in this messy world. No topics are barred as we offer roundtable discussions on life, spirituality, politics, and what it means to be a woman in the modern age. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. Thais Sky here. Welcome to episode 1 of Reclaim. This has been a thought in my head for a very long time, and I'm so excited that it's now becoming a thing because you're listening to it. So clearly, it's now a thing.
Who's listening?
The people are listening.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, no, they're listening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the voice you just heard right there is my dear friend Lindsey Rae. You know, I recorded a whole episode 1 for y'all, and I didn't really like it because just sitting in a closet talking by myself doesn't really excite me.
So wait, talking by yourself about yourself doesn't excite you?
No, right. Yeah, that's what I found.
Yeah.
I found that out the hard way.
That.
Like 50 minutes of just listening to myself talk to myself about myself just made me realize that I'm going to go kill somebody.
That's good.
So I decided to bring one of my dear friends on for podcast episode numero uno to play the role of...
What role do I play in your life, Thais? Please tell the people who are listening what role I play in your life.
So you play many roles, but in this particular situation, you're going to play the role of asking me questions-ish. Sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really put much thought into this, but I decided that it's going to be a good idea. And I also have Chewy, my 10-pound terrier poodle situation mix, trying to find his way in life. So we also have that going for us.
Yeah, and then Miko at any point could chime in with his barking, which is my dog. So you never know.
We never know what you're going to get.
We're also in my closet, and we're waiting for my washer and dryer to probably chime at any moment.
This is life, you know?
Yeah.
This is the epitome of what happens in life.
This is real life.
Shit happens all the time.
In closets. All over the world, apparently. Especially with the podcast craze going.
Yes, there is a podcast craze going. So I think that this is really what this podcast is about. Like, shit is happening all over the world, so we're going to sit in closets and talk about them. And try to figure out how we can step into our greatest, best, most amazing self while being very grounded in the human experience and the challenges that we have as women in the world. So this podcast is going to be a good mix of both spiritual conversations, which to me provides the context so that we can then look at, with the spiritual lens, everything that is going on in the world with kindness and thoughtfulness and sympathy and love and communion and really an emphasis on human dignity.
I love that. Love that lens.
Yeah, so that's what this is about. Okay, so let's talk about the awakening.
Well, why don't you let me conduct
the
conversation.
And make it happen.
Because I feel like I'm bringing a good perspective of what the people, you know, that you're telling me are going to listen to this.
They are listening to this.
Those people, what they might want to know about you.
Right, okay.
Since this is episode 1, right?
Yes.
Right? This is what I'm here to do. So
yes, okay.
Let me fulfill.
Okay. Fulfill your obligations and duties in life.
All right, so here's the thing, Thais. We've been friends for a while now, right? The past 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think we talk about really interesting, important things with a lot of depth, which is one thing that I appreciate about our friendship so much. And we talk about the things that are really going on and really matter.
Yeah.
Now, the last year has been really intense for you specifically in your own awakening.
Yeah.
And what do you feel like has been the major things that you have been waking up to in this past year?
Yeah. So I've been a coach since 2011. I've been running a business since around that time. I started teaching yoga, and I was a health coach, and I was working at Lululemon at some point.
So typical.
Of what?
So typical. I was a health coach, and I was a yoga instructor, and I was working at Lululemon.
I was going to CrossFit. And yes, very, very, very typical of the stories of people coming into this wellness experience.
It's a gateway.
It is
a gateway drug.
We
like it.
Yeah. And so I've been doing this for a hot minute, right? And so in my journey, I've shifted over from health coaching to realize I never gave a fuck about what people ate, and I really cared more about why they were binging, why they were experiencing anxiety. And so that forced me to go deeper into my studies of women's psychology and what does it look like for women to operate in this world. And I was very much operating from the lens, which I think a lot of coaches and teachers and healers that are white women or white appearing women are operating from. And this is the lens of what they call a post-feminist society, which is this idea that, at this point, the only thing that is stopping women from really truly being equal in the world is our own desires and propensity and motivation. And that there's really nothing stopping us from being the greatest, best selves.
Right, like we're making all that up.
Right. Like there is no oppression anymore. Like we're post the oppression.
Right.
Yes. And so
right.
Women and men have equality. We just now have to break the glass ceilings.
Have we manifested our way out of that? We're poking a little fun.
We are poking fun. We love it. And so the lens is right that now we are the fulfillers of our own destiny. And if we just use certain tools like the law of attraction and manifesting, and we have the appropriate thoughts, and we make a decision, right? Everything's a choice. You just have to decide. Then everything will be available for you. And you can have it all. You can have it all. As women, you can have it all. You can have the glamorous life, and you can make money, and you can have children and be really great mother. You can have it all. And if you don't have it all, it's because you're not deciding enough.
Right.
That you want it all.
Because you're actually doing something wrong. Because the system isn't broken.
Exactly. That's exactly right. The system is no longer broken. We live in a post-racial, post-feminist society where everything is great. Now it's just a matter of us pulling our own buckles, our own shoes.
Bootstraps.
Bootstraps.
Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
That's the only thing that's missing. And then women will be successful. So this is the narrative that the self-development industry kind of wears.
Yes.
And abides by. And this past year, like I think many white women, we've awoken to the realities that the system actually still very much hates women. We elected embodiment of the patriarchy and a wounded masculine figure that I think is the epitome of, like, he is the manifestation of the underlying currents in our society, that this is what we've been playing with all along. He just is now a physical manifestation of that.
Oh, I always say, since all this went down, November 4th.
Yep.
I always say, this is it is an unearthing.
Yes.
It's always been there.
It's always been there.
We just really needed to be smacked in the face with it.
And Trump is a backlash against the rise of blacks in our society. We saw Obama come into office, and Obama was not perfect, and he had his limitations, but he was a symbol of a possibility of equalization amongst the race, amongst the different races in our culture. And Trump is basically the rise of white supremacists saying, "Oh no, that's not the way it's going to work.
Right.
That's not going to go down. That's not okay for us. This is our country." And we're going to make America great again.
Yeah.
As if we were ever great, right? Many people are like, we've never been great. But anyway, so Trump woke me up, but he wasn't the only it was not the only thing that was going on at that time that woke me up. The other thing that was arising within me was a real dissatisfaction with the coaching industry, because I was doing all the right things. I was manifesting, I was positive thinking, I was visualizing, I had my vision boards, I, was doing all these things to attract clients and money and success, and it wasn't coming in the way that I was taught was supposed to be coming. And so because, again, there's nothing wrong with the system,
right?
It's all you, I started to really believe that there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Because I'm not being successful in my business. And I was offering women these incredible tools of transformation, some really deep things, but I didn't feel like I could market those things because it's not as fun and as flashy and as salesy as business coaching and
not as surface level-y.
Right. And so I was not only unaligned with my services and what I was offering and my marketing, but I was also unaligned in that I was operating under the mindset that it should be easy, I should be making a lot of money, and where I'm struggling, it's my fault. And so there was a lot of blame and shame, and that's what our industry does. It really shames people that if you're not finding quick success, you're not hustling hard enough or believing in yourself enough.
And it's funny because, as you're sharing all of like the pinnacle things that really started to shake you into this awakening. And we will always continue, obviously, to awaken more and more as we grow and learn and see more things. But I'm recognizing that, we talk so much about this in like our everyday life, just as friends, right? And just as coaches, in the industry. And we have spent a lot of time kind of like just talking in general about how is no one else seeing this? Are we the only ones? And we check ourselves with each other often where, okay, are we just bitching here?
Yeah.
Are we just like, And like we really do. And that's one thing that I think is really important for anybody that's kind of in an industry that feels completely overwhelmed.
Yes.
And kind of has a little bit of their finger on a pulse that something doesn't smell quite right.
Right.
I think it's so important
to start questioning. Be
curious.
Yes.
Find other people that you can talk about it with, and because this is a big problem.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And so what I kind of started to understand, and I'm skipping forward just a little bit, but I think it's applicable here, is that a lot of what's happening in the coaching industry is like a pyramid scheme, where coaches were teaching coaches how to make money in the same way that they were making, and then those coaches were then teaching their clients how to make money in the same way. But the only people that were really benefiting from it was the 1%. So in trickle-down economics, the premise is if you cut tax breaks for the upper richer people, then it's going to trickle down, right? So it's the same thing in the coaching industry where they say if you empower one woman, then she's going to empower her community. And so you just have to make a lot of money. And if you make a lot of money, you've done your civic duty. You've done your responsibility in your community, because by making money, you're then adding into your community. But I'm not necessarily seeing that is the case in the coaching industry. What I am seeing is that certain people are benefiting from it, but it's not actually empowering the collective, because it's not, personal freedom does not equal collective liberation. And women are not actually becoming more equal by a few people in the coaching industry making a lot of money. And so there were many things that were happening at that time, but mostly I was feeling very jaded by the industry, and I was starting to wake up to, or reawaken, because I had been very politically active when I was younger, but reawaken to the political climate. And what really shook me was my realization and awakening of white privilege.
Yeah, big one. Really big one. And I knew that you were going into this, and so that's why I did not jump in and kind of add and correct you earlier when you said, you know, the system is broken and, you know, we're still oppressing women.
Right.
And I wanted to obviously add not only women,
yes.
but, you know, brown, black, indigenous people
yes.
are still very oppressed. But I knew that we were going to go here.
Well, I wasn't aware of that yet.
Right.
Because we live in a post-racial society where racism isn't a thing anymore.
Right, because everybody's clear.
Right. So, yeah, you know, it's... That awakening changed a lot for me. Specifically, acknowledging and seeing through the lens of I actually have tremendous amount of privilege, and I have been perpetuating violence against women by not honoring and acknowledging and looking at my privilege.
Right.
And I know that that's something that you've been going through in the past few months as well.
Oh yeah. It's a rude awakening, and it's really, really difficult. But the things that I keep saying is that I really do believe, because I do look at life through a spiritual lens as one of my lenses.
Yeah.
You know, one of obviously the many lenses that I have. Right now I'm trying to put a crack in my white privilege lens.
Yes.
Even though that lens will never go away because I can never shed the skin that I was born into. But that lens can not be my primary lens.
Yes.
And so spiritually, though, I really do believe that we all walk this earth at this time for a specific reason.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that, you know, Thais and I do, we really do. We poke a lot of fun kind of at the coaching industry, especially
and
like the
self-development and the spiritual
and
industry.
especially like the white women's spiritual
I just call it the
world.
spiritual industry.
Well, I mean,
that's
like
that's what
mean,
it is.
That's what it is, you know.
All the crystals,
right? And I mean, we obviously both have gone through our own journeys within that, and that was definitely, it served as a gateway.
Yes.
I think the problem that happens, and we talk about this often, is that people, not everybody uses it as a gateway.
Yes.
And then people get stuck in
they
these
land
funnels.
There. Yes.
Right? And
yes.
all these funnels, and then we're not really actually digging in and doing the really deep, dirty work that needs to be done. That's really hard.
Yeah.
Really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Rude awakening, tough pill to swallow, but these are the pills that we're choking down every day in an attempt to really do the work that we're supposed to do at this time.
Yeah. So the way that we see white privilege, you know, or privilege in general, I should say, is that we live in a society where certain ideologies are revered or are honored or are looked at as better than others. So the color of your skin gives you more ease in your life than other colors of skin. Your gender or how you conform to your gender gives you push it, like wind in your back. It like helps facilitate.
Wind in your sails.
Yes, helps facilitate the journey of life. And oftentimes when we have privilege, we don't even know that we have it. And that was how I felt.
Well, that's the problem.
When I woke up when I kind of was starting to awaken to the fact that, because I've always known there was racism, but I didn't think I personally contributed to that racism.
Right.
Because I love all people. We're all one. We're all the same.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize.
You can manifest anything, and anyone can do that.
And then I started to realize that actually there are some people that have it easier based on the economy, based on government, based on our socioeconomic system than other people. And as a white appearing woman, I have more privileges than someone who is browner or blacker or whatever, darker skin than I do.
Absolutely.
And even though I am an immigrant and I do have less privilege because I am an immigrant of a culture and a society, Brazil, that is very sexualized and revered, and everyone's like, oh, you're so sexy because you're from Brazil.
Oh, hey, Brazil.
Right. And so that puts me at a higher privilege point than an immigrant from, let's say, Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Or another, Muslim-dominated country. So privilege is on a spectrum, and that's what I really realized. And because privilege is on a spectrum, while I do honor that decisions are important. There are some people that literally cannot have the same breadth of decision making as others because of their privilege.
Or safety.
Exactly.
For that matter. You know, safety is a big issue for me over my own personal trauma. So safety is always kind of in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think the things that have hit me the most in my personal awakening with, you know, white supremacy and my own white privilege and that lens is safety.
Yeah.
And it's, yes, all people can have hardships. All people can have struggles and pain. And we all go through a painful process just by being human.
Yeah.
However, white people don't go through those pains, those hardships, those struggles because the color of their skin.
Right. Well, and you know, I feel like is someone that can speak to this so beautifully because you do have so much trauma in your past and you come from very poor upbringing.
Right.
And you didn't have a lot of access to things that a middle class white woman would. Mm-hmm. And you really did have to work your way up to the top. And so even most people that can't acknowledge the privilege come from the same type of background where they're like, I pulled myself out of the bootstraps. I didn't have anything. So how can you say that I have privilege?
Right. And it's very, very difficult. And I see it happen all around me all the time. And because I am able to see
both sides,
the difference, you know, I find it frustrating and difficult why others can't.
Right.
Why other white people can't.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was huge for me, Lindsay. I mean, when I woke up to privilege and to my inherent racism as a white woman and what that meant in terms of my business, it's like things just clicked for me.
Yeah.
And I recognized very quickly with very little resistance that one of the many reasons why what I was doing in the world wasn't fully clicking in my heart was because I wasn't fully grounded in my humanity, and I had been unintentionally perpetuating violence. And the way I like to think about it is I listened to this podcast where a vegan was talking about how eating meat in and of itself is an inherent act of violence because you have to murder a sentient being in order for you to consume meat.
Right.
But because it's become so normalized in our society, it doesn't mean that violence is no longer there. It's that we've hit a level of numbness, like we've numbed ourselves out to that level of violence.
On particular animals.
Yes.
Because we've normalized it for specific animals, but not for others.
Like I could never consume my Chewy.
Or Miko, right?
Right.
However, a cow is fair game. Fair game.
We look at it and we're like, yummy meat.
Right.
So when we kill an animal and we consume that meat, we are inviting violence into our bodies, even if we are unconscious to it because we've numbed out to it because it's so normalized in our society.
Right.
I see, and I thought that was a brilliant perspective. And he talks about how when he stopped eating meat, he actually felt freer in his body. And now when he even looks at meat or thinks about meat, he actually feels that violent form. You know, it's kind of like when you...
Empathy.
Yes. It's kind of like when you stop watching violent TV and then you turn on a violent show. And
it's so jarring.
Jarring, yes.
Absolutely.
That was how he explained it. And so I actually see whiteness being the same thing.
100%.
We've become, as white-skinned people, normalized to a certain level of violence against our black and brown brothers and sisters because it's become normalized.
Well, what we've done is we've done the same thing to specific beings.
Yes.
We have dehumanized
yes.
specific people in our human race.
Yes.
Just like we have
chosen specific animals
yes. to make it normal to eat and not eat.
Yes.
It's a carbon copy. You are so spot on with that.
So whiteness is actually a disease. there's no inherent value in whiteness. The only value is that it perpetuates violence against people who are not white. And so if we don't do our work in dismantling our perspective of whiteness and do the work of, dismantling our own ways that we uphold the white supremacy, we're really doing no better than the white supremacists in Charlottesville who marched and did the things that they did.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's part of us taking ownership for our collective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so it grounded me in my humanity. So
absolutely.
When I woke up to this, I actually felt, by being a witness to how I was unconsciously perpetuating violence against people, I was actually grounding more in my body. I actually felt freer in my body. To me, it wasn't a form of shame where now I'm the worst person in the world. It was more like, holy fuck, I've been upholding something unintentionally, and now I am going to do the work to remove my upholding of that, and I feel so much freer because now I see people and their experiences, and I can honor that those experiences are not mine. They're not my experiences. So we are all one because we're all humans, but I do see color. Color blindness is a form of violence because
absolutely.
We are dishonoring the fact that there are people who, because of the color of their skin, have a different experience than us.
So we're ripping that experience away from them when we walk around and with our white privilege and say, I don't see color.
Right.
Everybody's the same.
Right.
No, they're not.
Yep. So it's like I put on a thoughtful lens of being human and falling more in love with humanity. And that has changed everything for me because I stopped seeing the world in the narrow view of how it should be, and I started to see the world as how it truly is.
So let me ask you this. What specifically kind of in your day-to-day do you feel like has changed and shifted because of this awakening?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the most impactful thing that it has done is it has allowed me to be more conscientious when I'm running my business on how I may be unintentionally excluding people from the conversation. And so instead of centering myself and my experience in my business, I'm choosing to really make my business not just be about me and make it be about the message that I want to elevate in the world, about worthiness, about reclamation, about womanhood, about spirituality, and separate the me-ness of it, the me. So one small example is when I look at images that I've been using that are not me, they were all of white women. So I started to notice how that doesn't feel good.
Yep.
Because I'm very narrow in my representation of what a woman is. And, woman is such... I love being a woman so much. And I love women's psychology. And why would I want to exclude certain voices from that conversation when those voices add such a richness, such a depth, such a layered nuance in a very complicated world? I was literally excluding people. And yes, it was unintentional, but impact impact is more important than intention. Mm-hmm. So I started to become very cognizant of how I was operating in my business and the language I was using and what I was choosing to speak on. And, let's talk about money, for instance. Saying that you can make as much money as you want can be true. And if we're not taking into account the systemic problems, then we're basically saying, and if you don't make the money you want, it's your fault. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to shame unintentionally my women to make them feel like they're the problem in a world where the system is the problem. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, there's so much that we can do. There's so much personal responsibility that we can have. But if we don't put it in the context of the spiritual bucket, and then within that, the context of the world as it is, then I'm doing a disservice to the women who come to work with me.
Big time.
And I think that that's what I love about our conversations, Lindsey, is that we always remember the spiritual container when we talk about social justice and when we talk about this work.
Right.
Because I believe the spiritual container is what gives us context.
Absolutely. I also think that it's important to our own growth not only as individuals, but humanity, to have that spiritual context behind us and around us, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
And the human experience is a brutal one.
Yes.
It really is, but that's what it's all about. Growing pains hurt for a reason. How do you feel like you are going to continue to move forward in reclaiming
Bingo.
more?
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I'm going to be asking that question to guests moving forward.
Oh my gosh, look at me.
I know. What are you reclaiming? What does that mean to you? And I am going to be having more conversations on this idea of reclamation, because there's so many things that I think as women, we have an opportunity to reclaim and make our own. So here's an example. The more that I've awakened to feminism and intersectional feminism, the more I've realized that pretty much all systems that we operate in was created by men for men.
By white men.
Exactly.
For white men.
Thank you for adding that. Yes, exactly. Spirituality.
White straight men, right? I mean, let's really call it for what it is.
And even things that aren't white men, like spirituality and religion was, created by different types of men from different backgrounds. It was still an understanding that it was for men.
Well, yes, and especially in this country that we live in right now, which, we are in the United States of America. What happened with spirituality and religion in this country was it was taken, and that filter, that lens was dominant.
Yes.
In that.
Yes. And so it is no wonder then that women don't ever quite feel comfortable in these conversations of spirituality, of self-development. Self-development was created by men for men. White men, white rich-ass men started writing books to help other white men become rich and become successful.
And to coddle their own fragility.
Yes.
And to basically not even need to actually take ownership or responsibility for anything that they were doing.
Right. The laws of this country was created for white men with purposeful exclusion of women. It wasn't that it was unintentional. It's that they did not see women as needing to have space.
Absolutely.
And they certainly didn't think that anyone who was not white needed space.
Right.
Because my emails keep coming off. Because they were property. When we look at it from that lens, that's where the reclamation can start to happen. Because once we see that the system was not created for us, we get to decide, okay, so how are we going to make it be for us? How are we going to restructure the system to make it be for us? So as my journey in the past year of reclaiming my womanhood, reclaiming who I am as a woman, what's been really interesting for me is the idea of the hero's journey, a mythological summary, pretty much, by a man named Joseph Campbell. He was a mythologist, and he collected, a myriad of myths from all different cultures, and he found an overarching pattern called the hero's journey. And it's beautiful. And for so many years, women...
And so inspiring, right?
Yes. And for so many years, women have taken that model on as their own. And we just changed it to say the heroine's journey as for women. But it's still the same as the hero's journey. Well, Joseph Campbell was asked. He was asked, well, what about women? In your model, how does women fit in? And his response was, women don't need to go into the hero's journey. They're already there. They just have to realize that they're there. And a lot of women psychologists and women, in this world are like, well, wait a minute. We do have our own journey. And our own journey is a journey of reclaiming the feminine in the masculine world. And so that is the ultimate reclamation, is reclaiming our sense of self in the world that has robbed us of our sense of self. That's what the worthiness wound is. So much of the worthiness wound is acknowledging that your feelings of inadequacy are actually not your burden. You were robbed of feeling worthy, of feeling like you belonged on this planet since birth. Because since birth, you were told that you have to conform to the male standards of success and time, or money and time, right? That's how the masculine systems measure success. Time and money. And that if you don't align by those things, then you're worthless. And so women have spent their entire childhood trying to conform to the male gaze and trying to conform to the way that they thought that they were going to belong. And so of course we're going to feel unworthy. Of course we're going to feel inadequate. Of course we're going to feel like we don't belong. And if we feel like we don't belong, and if we don't feel connected to ourselves, why would we want to change the world? How can we change something we don't belong to? How can we commit to putting ourselves out there as feminists when it's not fun and it's not glamorous, it's not pop culture? How can we stand for other women, including women of color, including, disabled women, including women, who don't fit the perfect ideal woman narrative? How can we stand for all women when we're not even feeling like we belong here, or that we're worthy of being here, or that we're allowed to be here?
Well, it seems to me like that's a perfect example that the system that was put in place really works.
Yes, it does. Because then we don't have to show up. The system is telling us that we have to fit certain ways, and then we don't. And then what happens? And so I want to be very clear here. What Lindsey and I are talking about, we're not being victims. We're not playing victimhood.
No.
We're not saying that we're the victims of the system, and so we just get to blame men, right? There's no part of that. And if you're hearing that, then that's an invitation for you to pull back and stop for a minute, because what you're actually hearing is that when we can name what's happening, we actually bring that power back to us so that we can then do something about it.
Or identifying and labeling what is true.
Right.
And
there's a difference between being a victim and feeling like a victim.
100%. Because the reality is, yes, this structure is set up to victimize people.
Exactly.
So yes, there are victims.
Including women.
Absolutely.
In our rape culture, right, women are the victims.
Right.
And
however, we're not sitting wallowing in it, saying, "Oh, woe is me."
We don't have a victim mindset.
Right.
Our mindset is that we are victim of this unfortunate circumstances, and remember, spiritual context, and we chose this.
Right. And we're strong enough to be here at this time.
Yes.
So let's label it and fucking stand together and do something about it.
Yes. I believe that it's the women of color that are going to change the world.
Because
they're the fucking strongest. Because they are the most
not
oppressed.
disagree with you.
And they are fucking fierce. And they're going to change the world. And as white women, what we can do is be the best fucking allies and get out of the fucking way.
Absolutely.
So I think that that's important to paint the difference, in the victim conversation, because we're very quick in our very judgmental state to say, oh, you're playing victim, you've lost your power, and that's not actually. I feel like there's a deeper conversation there. Maybe we have to have a whole podcast episode on reclaiming the word victim and victimhood.
I love that.
Because I think that's a way that we shame actual victims from not using their voice and stepping into their power.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Because if we're in rape culture that benefits men, and we make victims of rape seem like they're being, quote unquote victims, and they're just trying to get money or whatever, then we silence them.
Absolutely. It's a way that the system again works.
Yeah. I really think we should investigate that. I'm going to write that down.
Absolutely.
I think 100%. That's a really good one.
Add it to the Trello board.
I'm adding it to the board. So that's it. I think that's all I got. Is there anything else?
That's all you got?
About reclaiming?
That's all you got for us today,
What it means to reclaim?
This is your show. This is your show. I mean, there's probably so much more, and it'll probably always continue to evolve, and you'll always have more to say about it as you awaken more and more, and as, you know, the veils continue to lift and the lenses continue to shatter. And
this is a journey, and this is why I'm doing a podcast, because I want y'all on this journey with me. I want together for us to awaken to our innate greatness, our innate worthiness, our innate sense of responsibility for, you know, the love and kindness of human dignity. I want all of us to be humanitarians. What we can do is really carry this sense of responsibility for all humans in our hearts. And in that love, we can really do some radical, incredible things. Because I see love as action, as activism, as calling out injustices. That is radical love, because we are seeing the world as it is instead of this idealized vision of the world that is preventing us from really putting our voices out into the world. And I think we should have more women's voices in the world, and that's why I'm doing this. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be featuring some incredible women who are doing incredible work. I'm going to have some really good friends on this podcast that we have this conversation all the time, and I feel like conversations is the best way to be having these sort of conversations.
Absolutely, because silence is violence. Let's not forget. Let's not forget.
That's amazing.
So don't walk around just thinking, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even talk about it. No, you can.
Lindsey's got a lot of anger.
Oh, yes.
We're going to be reclaiming anger in another podcast.
We are.
That's another one.
It's very important.
We've got to add.
Very
important.
Yes,
anger is righteous. Anger is holy. Anger is
sacred.
Sacred. It is a sacred vessel.
And it's anger is loaded with information. Loaded.
All emotions. We're going to reclaim emotions. I have to.
Absolutely. I mean, you really should have
a list.
Pen and paper.
No, I really should. I'm going to write this down.
Are you remembering all this?
He's dead on my lap.
Chewy is not being a good assistant right now.
No, he never really is, though.
I know.
He kind of fails at life. All right, y'all. Go listen to the other 2 episodes available for you. There's some really good nuggets there. Go reclaim your life. Go take your life and do something powerful with it. Be a vessel of love and go take action. Lindsey and I had a lot of thoughts around my story and navigating privilege, and now we want to hear yours. Come hang out with us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find Lindsey at with Lindsey Rae, that's Lindsey with an E, and Rae like R-A-E, and me at I am Thais Sky. And if you want to check out more of Lindsey's work, go to www.withlindseyrae.com. And as always, you can learn more about me and my work at www.thaissky.com. See you next week.